All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Privratsky alongside Mark. We are here for a dual post-game pregame event following the tough draw we just saw between Bemidji and Mankato in an NSIC early conference showdown. We'll also be previewing the Gopher Soccer game at Nebraska to open Big Ten play. Mark, talk about that game. Was pretty wild. Talk about just sort of how the game went overall.
Well, equal time followers, welcome to an event of confusion with Matt and I playing just like the refs calls a little bit in this game at times. But I will say this, the ref set a standard, so it was a loose standard, but it mostly set a standard of people getting cleared out sometimes. So there was a lot of physical play, but both teams, thankfully, NSIC games can get a little physical and a little direct, but both these teams did play forward and did, really try to attack. There was just really good goalkeeping and defensive efforts that kept it, to a 1-1 draw. But really exciting and crazy goals by the two big stars, as you might expect, coming in.
It seems like when we see Bemidji and Mankato play in like the conference tournament or like late season, they maybe aren't quite as willing to like sort of throw forward and play attacking. They sort of like play the long ball, but don't necessarily get numbers forward. It felt like there was a little more attacking energy since it was a little earlier in the season. Maybe like the stakes weren't entirely known versus the end of the year. Sort of the conference is like on the line, and you see it just sort of devolve into like long ball. Did it seem like there was a little more like possession than what we've seen like late in the season?
Both halves played out somewhat similarly in that Bemidji like really impressively came out at the start of both halves. The first half they had like 3 chances within I think 5 minutes, likely or certainly within 10, and then Mankato eventually kind of grasped and found form to just when they're in rhythm offensively, they just keep driving at you and they have the ball a lot. And so you just kind of get trapped into it. So Bemidji got in the middle of both halves, they kind of got trapped into just surviving Mankato's play, which they did very well. But then, it's in a game like this that can be close. It was just the one moment. It was insane at the end that Jenny Vetter found the one moment and got a header of all things. And it was just, it was a wild goal to finish it, to make it probably an earned draw, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I think Bemidji, if they would have come out of this with a win, that's like a huge result for this type of matchup happening early in conference play. I think Mankato, we've seen just time and time again, they have so many tournament runs in them. Like all the players on this team that are fifth years have been to like multiple NCAA tournaments, like been through multiple NSIC tournaments where they win through the conference tournament. So it seems like they just have that mentality of having been there before. And like Vetter, after she scored, like the raw, like ruthless, like emotion and energy, like in that celebration was just like, they're just always going to keep coming.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, an earned draw, but for Bemidji to walk away, a draw is not terrible against a team like Mankato, but this could really sort of impact the conference standings at the end of the fall, right?
Yeah. I mean, for both teams, I mean, they know if they're performing well through the season, they're going to likely earn, a bid to the tournament, even if they don't win the NSIC, which is the, I guess, the fallback, but it's certainly not their goal. So, Bemidji lost to Mankato in the tournament last year, and they had tied in the regular season. So they want, and they want to get a win. When we interview any Bemidji player, we say, "Who do you want to beat?" And before you finish the question, they say Mankato. It's so I think they'll take plenty from it. I mean, they'll take, Alyssa Stumba, the keeper for Bemidji, coming off a really impressive year with the Green Bay Glory in the W League. She clearly, is got into fitness for this year as she was last year. And Bemidji, like Mankato, has a lot of super seniors from the COVID year. So I'm sure they'll be able to take that. I mean, the fact that Sarah went could be depended on to, that might have been her only shot. I don't know. It might have been her only shot, and it was just a great ball from Erin Becker, and she took one chance. So that's the type of thing you have to be able to do in a tournament game or against Mankato going forward, is be able to take your one chance and be able to hold strong. And they mostly did it in the last minute. College soccer is crazy because you can see the clock counting down. It's like it's under a minute, and when they're actually, so it's
no overtime this year,
right,
and no
right,
overtime.
yeah, which is good for the players. But yeah, and it's so the stakes are high.
Right. And we a shock to no one, considering I didn't edit the titles to these posts. We originally were going to have our mom, the legend, Jean Privratsky, on for a show. We, as everyone is probably well aware by how much Mark and I talk about it, the moms are easily our biggest segment of supporters from basically every team and fan base. And so we are going to begin having moms directly on the show. What do the moms think will be, I think, the tentative name of the segment. Maybe we'll workshop that. And so we were not able to get mom onto the show tonight. She has maybe a line dancing performance, some other commitment that was going on. But
Matt didn't book it well enough in advance.
I talked to her several days ago. Mark thinks I just texted her this morning. I talked to her 3 times about it. Don't worry. But Mark was able to speak directly to our mom, and we had some key questions for her to address. Mark, what was mom's take on both sort of a player, a couple key players and other questions we had wanted her to speak to?
Yeah, she enjoyed the game. Shout out to anyone out there watching. She didn't have a kid in this game, so she watched Bemidji versus Mankato, I think, along with her dad, Scott. But I mean, the first player that stood out to her, she had to credit to Alyssa Stumba, who was amazing in goal. She was impressed with it just overall. I don't know if she'd watched any of those D2 games. She went to some summer games with us this year, but yeah, she had fun. I know she wished she could join. And then she also mentioned, I think Stuber or Stuckey. I don't remember the name. It's tough if the name isn't said on the broadcast. It's tough for us watching to catch the numbers. But She was impressed by the defensive effort by Bemidji to really stick in and hang in there. So we'll have to get Jean on again.
And of course, as we say, moms are the biggest fans. Mom is literally watching on Facebook and commenting right now because she just can't help herself, and she's shouting us out. Yes, Stumba had just a crazy game in goal. I mean, I think it's impossible to watch Mankato and not mention Stocky. There we go. Favorite ball handler. Stombeck was a great goalie. I love it. By the way, didn't realize I could put comments on the screen. We just learned that. I think, Stumba was so great in goal. I think it's impossible to watch Mankato and not notice players Allie Williams is so gritty in the midfield for them. You just notice she's the player with the number 3. She has the black headband. If you tune into a Mankato game for the first time, she's just always battling. She somehow has, good touch and plenty of grit. And then, Maylee Mathis with just touch for days in the Mankato, midfield. But then Jenny Vetter, of course, comes up with the goal. Just all these big time players. Sarah Wentz shot was just absurd. That angle was impossible. She hits it first touch. I mean, just you don't always see in the college game, a lot of the times the results are sort of grinded out. So those top performers, to see them show out is just it's just a blast. I mean, a shot from that angle is just so kooky because Mackenzie Rath is a great keeper. So if you score that shot, that's crazy town.
Yeah, it's part of what comes from having all the extra eligibility too. I mean, teams have just you see it in all the other college sports too, like basketball where it's really prevalent. But I mean, it stands out when you have 23-year-olds. They matter. They're going to have a level of maturity and, composure more than an 18-year-old. So, I mean, it's just, there were just so many big seniors, 5th-year seniors in the game.
Right. We'll give a quick shout out to Kelly Schultz on the broadcast who name dropped Equal Time Soccer. So we have to return the love. Big shouts to Kelly, who does the game for the Beaver Soccer Network and then also for the stream. So shouts to her for her work for the Beaver game. I'll pause quick just to let folks know this show is brought to you, of course, by Pentz Homes. You see them on the screen there. Whether you're buying or selling, you're looking to do some projects in your current home, Nate and Lydia can help you find what you need. Need help financing for a basement remodel, need a second bath, a workspace now that you're working from home. Pentz Homes and their preferred lender, Angie Shear, with Luminant Financing, can help you find the right financing tool. Go to pentzhomes.com to learn more or find them on social media at Pentz Homes. I'm currently standing in a Pentz home, so we are full-throated supporters of Pentz Homes for sure.
At home in the Midway, with the community. Let's move it to the Gophers. We're talking about Big Ten soccer now, which is exciting. The Gophers started the year, had a couple trip ups. I mean, and not against opponents that nothing to be embarrassed of, but games that maybe they let slide. Now they had a couple games against North Dakota and Omaha, which games you expect to win, and then a solid win against Marquette. So I'm just wondering for you overall, going into Big Ten, how do the Gophers look compared to what you maybe had as an expectation for the year?
I think it's kind of crazy to have the non-conference season so segmented that way in terms of performances. I think typically what we see from the U is, the non-conference schedule either in general is quote unquote soft, and so they run through it, like last year where they went undefeated in Aaron's first 7 games as head coach or whatever. This year was so weird because the toughest games were all in the first 4, and then the quote unquote softest games were maybe in the second 4. And so I think maybe it shouldn't have been as shocking to me as it was that they sort of underperformed those first 4 results and then, lock in the next 4. But I think the funny thing is I think it's kind of strange for a team with this much veteran leadership to take that long to ramp up. Like, I think you would have expected them to maybe have a slightly stronger start, but I think no matter how they've started, they are looking really good the last 4 games. And part of it was a formation shift from sort of a 4-4-2, like diamond midfield, into a 4-3-3. And like, especially the players who seem most unlocked in that is like Sophia Romine, the transfer from Wisconsin, has gone from looking like a pretty solid offensive player and really gritty defender to looking just like an absolute impact number 10 who can just sort of spark offensive creation in the final third. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like you think the ceiling just could be decently high for a team like this. Like maybe they can be a mid-tier Big Ten team, get into the Big Ten tournament. So it's been sort of crazy that first 4 games and second 4 games, how segmented it is. But I think, over and over the players speak about like the coaching staff being so supportive and so, authentically invested in their success. Like they just over and over talk about how good the coaching staff is and sort of believing in them. And like players don't always like bring that stuff up cold. Like you don't always hear a college player be like, these coaches are supporting us so much, it's so great. Like that's not like an automatic thing. So I think it speaks to the coaches sort of work in that first 4 weeks to say like, well, if we're underperforming 4 games in a row, what do we need to focus on? And, Coach Aaron Chastain said they've been focusing a ton on offensive creation and like final third combination. And you can see it because they just look better. And so it's been fun to see because especially when they're clicking, the team can be super, super fun to watch.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned one thing with Coach Aaron Chastain. She came in really late into preseason last year. So obviously that affects expectations for this year, just that it's a team that knows her better and she has space with their staff to implement. You mentioned one newcomer is a transfer, but, in terms of, the coaching staff having a fall to actually integrate new players in the spring, what newcomers have looked best to you early this year and have been, contributing in a real way?
Yeah, there's a few categories of like, to answer that question of, there's some players who are truly brand new. So, Sophia Romine and Gabby Cesaroni are 2 new transfers who came in the winter and had the whole spring to sort of get used to the system. And then even Amelia Brown is a freshman, but she early enrolled. And so she also had a full spring and just looked super composed as a holding midfielder, younger sister of Izzy Brown in this like sister era of Gopher Soccer. And then, so they've all looked strong, all looked like pieces of the rotation. And then, maybe most impressive on this team that's sort of loaded with 5th-year players and juniors and seniors is some true freshmen like Amelia Brown, but then also Sophia Bargeste. We're also in the Sophia era of Gopher Soccer, 3 Sophias in the rotation. She's come in and played major minutes right away. And I think people are still sort of underappreciating what that means for like multiple freshmen to get like rotation minutes under Aaron Chastain. Aaron Chastain does not give away rotation minutes. Like there were games last year where 2 subs were used the whole game, which in college soccer is so unbelievably outside the norm, like absurdly outside the norm. Like she only gives you minutes when you earn them. And so Bargeste got in, I think, in like the 2nd or 3rd game. And I was like, whoa, like that means she's really showing in training, like really capable, really solid. The big thing you notice with freshmen who gets minutes is that they are very physically capable and then they don't break down mentally. So like they look like they have a strong, solid frame. They look like they've been in a weight room, but then they also don't like, lose their shit as soon as they get on the field. And so it's been cool to see them out there. I think it's impossible in my most recent piece not to focus on Sophia Romine and Gabby Cesaroni, just because they've been immediate starters as transfers. You know, Cesaroni coming from D3, and then she's just like a Big Ten starting center back, is just like the coolest story in college soccer. And so those two, Cesaroni and Romine, are easily the two best newcomers, just the biggest impact newcomers. But it's been fun to see those freshmen get minutes too.
Yeah. No, I mean, at any level, it's tough for true freshmen to get in. That's why, like, you know, we noted in the D1 piece, Maddie Dulling, that UNC is the #1 team, and she's playing as a freshman. It's just, it says a lot. Says a lot when you can break in, because every player we interview talks about the transition that year being the toughest. What do you expect turning to Nebraska today? They can be a bit more physical team, a little more direct. Some of the teams in the Big Ten who aren't contenders have to play to survive a bit more the way they maybe do, if you describe it that way. But what do you expect from Nebraska today, and how the Gophers could, you know, break them down to get the W?
Yeah, my sort of running joke about Nebraska is like they joined the Big Ten from the Big 12 and like just sort of forgot that they've left the Big 12. Like people think of the Big 10 as being this like grueling physical conference. The Big 12 is the type of place where teams brag about having the most fouls in the entire country. And Nebraska is like the epitome of that in the Big 10. They have by far the most fouls in the conference. They, I believe, have the first or second most yellow cards in the conference. And versus like a team like Minnesota has plenty of grit. Like they'll foul throughout the game strategically and they'll battle. And, you know, Kaya Harper will try and get in a fist fight with an opposing outside back. But Minnesota has like one yellow card, and, you know, Nebraska comes in with like almost 10. You know, they just foul all game long. And so for a team like Minnesota, it's all a mental game of like, am I going to get pissed off that these players keep like grabbing my jersey, pushing me over, elbowing me constantly, like pulling me to the ground, like sliding all game long. I mean, to put it bluntly, like anytime the Gophers play Nebraska, the entire staff is just worried that players are going to get injured. Like that's the mindset of like when Minnesota has to play Nebraska. And so you just have to have a lot of mental discipline. Like you can't make mistakes and give up those counterattacks and let Nebraska go up. And then you just have to have some patience in the attack of, can we show some creativity? Can we get numbers forward? Can we move enough as an offense so that we stretch that Nebraska defense? And then also on things like set pieces, can we actually convert? You know, can we offer some driven service on corner kicks so that you actually have an ability to deflect toward goal versus just a big lofted ball where you sort of loft a chance towards net. So it's a lot of mental discipline. Like when you go on the road in the Big Ten, every game sucks. I mean, every game is really hard. And Minnesota, frankly, is not seen as that much stronger of a program than Nebraska this year. Like they're both seen as at best, you know, mid-tier or 8th, 9th, 6th, 7th, 10th, like best team in the conference. So if Minnesota thinks of themselves as better than that, this is a game where you at the very least have to get a result, but probably want to go in and get a win. Because not many games on the Gopher schedule will be more winnable than this one in Big Ten play.
Yeah, they might like the way they start Big Ten conference play. They starting with Nebraska, and then they start in with not you know, quite tip-top opponents in terms of not like contenders for the championship. They have Indiana, they have Northwestern, who are you know, maybe a step up from Nebraska, and then they get into some really tougher games like Michigan, Wisconsin. If they go through this 3-game stretch, you know, like of Nebraska, Indiana, Northwestern, leading into those tougher games, and they're successful, what will you think it is that makes them successful? Like, what do they need to do to get into formed, actually? Because Michigan was in the Final Four last year, so when they play them, they need to be in another level than what they're at now.
I think when you see Minnesota playing well, what you see is like, you know, they play from their strengths. So their strengths are their back line has just like a shitload of veteran leadership. I very regularly say like the back line is just old as hell, like 3 fifth-year players, and the young person on the back line is a junior. You know, like that's just a very old defensive unit. And so if they can be consistent and limit chances and not make Plashko make, you know, heroic saves all day long in net, then I think they put themselves in a position where then their offense can sort of get on the run. And so, you know, a team like Indiana, a team like Northwestern beat Stanford like just a few days ago. Like there's the thing about the Big Ten is like so many teams have these like wild swings between their floor and their ceiling, and Minnesota epitomizes that. So, like they can beat Penn State 4-0 and then they can go scoreless 2 weeks in a row against Nebraska and Iowa and they fall out of the Big Ten tournament. So
Right.
if it goes well, I think they're stout defensively, but they're able to get numbers into the attack. And having numbers in the attack has been how they combine in the attack.
Mhm.
They haven't shown a ton of ability to combine a bunch in the offensive end without those numbers. If they don't have like an outside back, like an Abby Franson or an Elena Dressley, sometimes they can stagnate. And so are they confident enough to send numbers forward, knowing that in Big Ten play, they're risking giving up those counterattacks?
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be sort of the early question of how much confidence do they have in themselves? Because if they get a result at Nebraska, I think you could see some good momentum when they come home, play Indiana, and then maybe they start believing in themselves. Because last year, I think you could have seen them, they could have finished strong and like finished as high as the 4 seed, and they fall all the way out of the Big Ten tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that is mentality. A lot of that is like the stress of the conference season. So
small margins, yeah.
Yeah, so this will be a big test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's exciting. Gopher fans too, just so you know. So I mean, they're away right now, but they're going to be back home next weekend. So yeah, stretch of at least 3 games at home at ELR in St. Paul. State Fair is done. Driving up there is a lot easier now. So it is a wonderful place to catch a game, especially as we move into fall. So for anybody who can get a chance next week, some more home games at ELR.
This year in particular has been kind of funny. The first several games they had were really light attendance wise. You like the State Fair stuff and other stuff, construction on Cleveland, whatever the hell is the reason people aren't coming. The last game there was like 1,000+ fans, and it really is just like it makes it more fun as a fan too. So games have been more fun recently, and it is just there's no venue exactly like it in Minnesota. You know, there's like where you have 1,000 to 1,500 fans, like a great playing surface, like quality soccer. So yeah, folks should come out. And so this is officially then that pregame show. Gophers kick off at 7:00 against the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the opening of Big Ten play for the Gophers. We mentioned Bemidji State and Mankato played to a 1-1 draw in sort of an epic early NSIC conference battle. Mark and I survived doing a show with each other, same voice and twin vibes all combined. So thanks for joining us.
Confusion.